माधवम कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama, Jaya Gandharvika Giridhari, Gandharvika Giridhari, Gaura Hari. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Subhadra Mai, Jaya Sudarshana. Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Ananta Dev, Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Ananta Dev. Jaya Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita, Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, शिला प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे। So welcome all the devotees for Sunday festival, Sunday feast. And also today very wonderful day, disappearance day, Acharya's great Acharya Gaur Kishore Das Baba's disappearance day. So let's get started. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskrutyam Naram Chaivam Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayate Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Share the screen. Shri Ram Prabhu, are you able to see screen?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 29 and Shloka number 6. Sakhaye Indriya Gana
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Kritam
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Sakhyastad Vrittaya Prana
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha
Pancharitti Yatho Radaha
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnana Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Kritam
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Sakhyastad Vrittaya Prana
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha
Pancharitti Yatho Radaha
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Kritam
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Sakhyastad Vrittaya Prana
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha
Pancharitti Yatho Radaha Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Kritam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Sakhayastad Vrittaya Pranaha
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Panchavritti Yatho
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha. Online? Hare Krishna. Anybody from online would like to recite shloka? Maybe Sri Ram Prabhu, are they can they unmute themselves?
Yes, they can unmute themselves.
Okay. Any devotees would like to recite?
Sakya Indriya Gana Jnanam Karma
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam Karma Satsakritam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Satyastad Vritya Prana
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Vritya Vritti Yato Raga
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha
Indriya Gana
Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam Karmam Cha Yat Kritam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Sakhaya Tad Vriteya Prana
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Pancha Vritir Yatho Raga.
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha. Thank you. Mataji, any Mataji? Yeah, please go ahead, bro. Sakhaya Indriya Gana
Jnanam karma cha yat kritam
Jnanam Karma Cha Yat Krutam
Sakhyastad vritaya prana
Sakyastat Vrittaye Prana
Pancha vriti yatha vraga.
Pancha Vrittir Yatho Ragaha. Any Matajis? Okay. So we'll read word to word meaning and then translation. Sakhaya, the male friends. Indriya Gana, the senses. Jnanam, knowledge. Karma, activity. Cha, also. Yat Krutam, done by the senses. Sakhaya, Sakyaya, female friends. Tad, of that senses. Vrittaya, engagement. Pranaha, life air. Panch Vritti, having five processes. Yatha, like. Uragaha, the serpent. Yatha Uragaha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The five working senses and the five senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagement of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpent, which was described as having 5 heads, is the life air acting within the 5 circulatory process. Purport. Krishna Bahir Mukha Hana Bhoga Vancha Kare Nikatastha Maya Tare Jhapatiya Dhare. That is from Prema Vivarta. Because of his desire to enjoy the material world, the living entity is dressed with the material gross and subtle bodies. Thus, he is given a chance to enjoy the senses. The senses are therefore the instruments for enjoying the material world. Consequently, the senses have been described as a friends, sometimes because of too much sinful activity. The living entity does not get a material gross body, but hovers on the subtle platform. This is called ghostly life. Because of his not possessing a gross body, he creates a great deal of trouble in his subtle body. Thus, the presence of the ghost is horrible for those who are living in a gross body, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.10. 15.10. उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वापि गुणान्वितं विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषाम्. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of material nature. One whose eyes are trained in the knowledge can see all this. The living entities are merged into the life of air, which acts in a different ways for circulation. There is a prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. And because the life air functions in this five-fold way, it is compared to the 5 hooded serpent. The soul passes through the Kundalina chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to Uraga, the serpent. Panchavrutti is the desire to satisfy the senses attracted by the 5 sense objects, namely form, taste, sound, smell, touch. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपं कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांचं श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान् सगन ललितान् श्री विशाखान्वितान् च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगे राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगं लंघयति यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं। So once again, welcome to our Sunday feast. So we are reading from Canto 4, chapter number 29, the creation of the fourth order, and the shloka number 6. So we'll read again the translation. The 5 working senses and the 5 senses that acquire knowledge, that are all made friends of Puranjani. So there are 2 words here. It's called as Sakhaya and Sakyas. Sakhaya is the male friends, and then Sakyas, which is the female friends. So the living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring jnanam, knowledge, and engaging in the activity karma. The engagement of these senses are known as girlfriends, which is a Sakyas, female friends. And the serpent, which was described as having 5 heads, is the life air acting within the 5 circulatory process. So this particular chapter, now we know this whole allegorical story that Narada is telling to Prachinarvi, last few chapters that we have been discussing. And now in this particular chapter, um, after telling all the stories by Narada, King Prachinvarhi is saying that I'm not able to understand all this, whatever this allegorical story that you are telling. It is so deep. And it is only at the level of Narada, who is at the level of Narada, can actually tell this story. So Prachinvarhi couldn't apprehend, couldn't understand that what is exactly it means. So he's asking Narad Muni, can you please explain the characters that you had explained in this whole story? So then Narad Muni, starting from this chapter shloka number 2, he starts describing who are these different characters. Then he says the first is the Puranjana. The Puranjana is nothing but the living entity. Of course, it was directed to the king himself, but to in indirect way, Narad Muni is saying it is nothing but the living entity. The city where the king was ruling, it was actually nothing but the body. The Avidnata, last time that we discussed that it is nothing but the Supreme Lord, the eternal friend of living entities. The 9 gates of the cities are called as the body with the 9 openings. Puranjani, the material intelligence. And in today's verse, Narad Muni is talking about the male friends, Sakhaya, that are the 10 senses, which are the Gyanendriya and Karmendriyas, and the female friends, Sakyas, the action of the senses. And then he also talks about Uragaha, the serpent with the 5 heads. That is nothing but the life air with the 5 different functions. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, which is nothing but the prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. So here in today's verse, it is mentioned that the serpent, Uraga, which is the 5-headed serpent, nothing but these 5 kinds of air, are followed by the attendants. And how many attendants are mentioned here? So today, in fact, it is 11 attendants, but in today's shloka, it is only the 10 attendants. So Narad Muni is saying Gana, Sakhaya Gana, we say, right? Bhakta Vrunda Gana. So Bhakta Vrunda Gana. Gana means the collections or the group. So here Sakhaya Gana means is the group of 10. And so what are these 10 attendants of which are the male friends of this Puranjani? They are the 5 Gyanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas. So those are the 10 attendants of this Puranjani. So what are those 10 that we know that the 5 knowledge, the Gyanendriya of knowledge acquiring senses are nothing but the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. And the senses, which are the working senses, are nothing but the voice, leg, hands, the evacuation organs, and the reproductive organs. So combined together forms the working mechanism, which is the 10 working senses. And of course, the 11th will be mentioned in the subsequent shlokas, that is the mind. So the living entity is entrapped in this body and interacts in this material world outside with these Gyanendriyas and Karmendriyas. So Gyanendriyas, he pursues the whole material world outside. So how the living entity acts? So it's like our senses gets the information, and then it acts through the working mechanisms, that is the Karmendriyas. So in the mind, the living entity, because we know the functions of the mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. So it thinks, it desires something, and then intelligence activates the working senses, which is the Karmendriya, and fulfills the desire. This is the way the whole chain goes. So just like any mechanical things that we take, there are sensors which captures the information, and there is a processor which processes, and there is activators, and which actually activates and gets the work done. So similarly, the design of this material body is designed such a way by Supreme Lord that there are the sensors, which are the Gyanendriyas, and then there is a processor which actually process and it gives the command, and then all these Karmendriyas are acting there. So this each of these male friends have hundreds of queens. These hundreds of queens, none other than the hundreds of desires that we all have. So Srila Prabhupada says the whole idea of enjoyment exists in the spiritual world as well as in the material world. The spiritual world, happiness is a different than what we enjoy in the material world. The spiritual world, happiness, living entity experience unconditional, whereas in the material world, the living entity enjoys the happiness, but it is conditional. So it depends on something else. There should be something to be true, then only we can get the happiness. In the spiritual, the Lord's different energy oversees the happiness of the living entity. In the spiritual world, Krishna's pleasure potencies oversees the happiness. And in fact, in Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Premavarta, Krishna bahir mukha hana, bhoga vancha kare, nikatastha maya tare jhapatiya dhare. So as soon as, so vancha, like vancha kalpataru, vancha is a desire, vancha kare. So what is that vancha the living entity does? Bhoga vancha kare. So you want to enjoy, but how? Krishna bahir mukha, turning the face away from Krishna, and that is how he wanted to enjoy independent of Krishna. And then what happens? Nikatastha. Nikata means very near. Nikatastha maya tare. So there is a maya very close to him. Jhapatiya dhare. Immediately maya pounds on him. And that is how we try to enjoy independent of Krishna under the energy, that is the external energy of Lord Sri Krishna. So that means if we don't want to see Krishna, as last week Amal Prabhu was saying that the moment that we don't, we have seen that Ichha Dvesha Samhuttena. So as soon as we desire that we want to enjoy independent of Krishna, then immediately Maya Jhapati, Maya pounces on. So that is how the whole activities of living entities goes in this material world. So let's now go much more details about these senses and how that acts and how it makes us happiness, how it gives happiness or suffering. In fact, in Upanishads, it gives a very pictorial representation of the body. We know that it says that it is nothing but the chariot. So the body is represented by the chariot. The passenger is nothing but the soul, and the driver is the intelligence, and the rein is nothing but the mind, and the horses of that chariot is the senses. Now, what horses sees here around make the horses go ether and thither, because as soon as horses see something, the horses would like to go there. So that is are nothing but the sense object, and as soon as the senses see something, the sense object, the senses would like to go and catch that or connect or get contacted with that sense object. Just like our eye wanted to see something beautiful form, our ear would like to hear some melodious song, our nose would like to smell something pleasant and aromatic objects, our tongue want to taste palatable objects, and of course Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Instruction that it would like to also vibrate, want to speak something, and the skin wanted to touch something soft. So the senses always seeking the contacts of the sense object. Yehi sansvarsha bhoga dukkha yona evate. So the senses are always looking for the swarsha, contacts. The senses always wanted to be in touch or contact with the sense object. The senses always work very hard to be in always touch with the sense object. And that is how called as the success of this material world. All endeavor, if you want to put in one word, one sentence, is the whole struggle in this material world is that the senses wanted to be in contact with the sense objects. Now, it could be favorable or it could be unpleasurable. And that is where in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna speaks in 6th chapter, 6.6, it says, Bandhuratmana atmanasya, enatmayam atmana jita, anatmanastu shatrutve, vartetatma vai shatruvat. For a person who has conquered this mind, the mind is the best friend. But for the one who is not able to control this mind, the mind is the worst enemy. So that means the mind, and we can extend that to all our senses. So if we are able to control our senses, that is the best way, the best situation that the living entity is in. But if we are not able to control the senses, then we are actually living with the worst enemy. And that is how, so that means when the senses are trying to get connect with the sense objects, if we get the pleasurable situation, that is the happiness that we get. But when the senses context in the sense objects, if the situation is unpleasurable, we get distress or moroseness, and that is the whole things. In fact, Srimad Bhagavatam, now we will see how uncontrollable senses can give us a dukkha, undesirable things. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that he sansparseja bhoga dukkha yona evate. So similarly, in Srimad Bhagavatam 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj says that yan maithunadi gruha me adi sukham hi tuchha kandu ene nakara yoriva dukkha dukkham. So here it is said that this sense, the yet maithuna adi graha medi. So the living entities graha medi trying to enjoy through the senses, which actually here maithunadi by headed by the sex pleasure. It is compared to the kandu yenena. Kandu yenena is nothing but the the itching sensation. Kara yora eva, by when we rub the two hands together, it is compared to the itching sensation. And how it is that tucham, very insignificant. So the satisfaction or the pleasure or the happiness that we get by having the senses in contact with the sense object, Srimad Bhagavatam, especially Prahlad Maharaj says that it's a tucham kandu enena karayora evi dukkha dukkham. It is nothing but dukkha and dukkha. Then what would be the problem? Because if we see that do it, just do it, enjoy Madi. So these are some slogans that we see in this material world. But Prahlad Maharaj alert us. He wants us. He says that trupenti neha krupana. But if we engage into the senses, connecting the sense object, independent of Krishna, trupenti neha, it will never satisfy. It will not give us the satisfaction that we are all looking for. However, krupana, the krupana, the miser, still he try. Srila Prabhupada says there are class 1 citizen, class 2 or class 3 or follower, that one just hears and then he actually becomes wiser. Somebody experiences, reads, hears, but still he does not know. So this is the third class of person. So similarly here, the miser, even if he knows that, he doesn't get satisfaction, even if he tries. And Prahlad Maharaj says that what he gets, bahu dukkha bhaja, he will finally get only dukkha and dukkha. But if somebody able to tolerate that urge, Vishayita Dhira, such a person is a sober person, and that is where it's actually glorified by Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, similarly, Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 55th shloka, it says, Prajahati yeda kaman sarvan parthe manogatan. So when man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which actually comes from the manogatan, which are nothing but the mental concoction, and atmaneva atmana tushtam sthita pradnyasa uchyate. So when this mind thus purified finds satisfaction self alone, is said to be in a pure transcendental consciousness. So here Lord Sri Krishna says that if we give all varieties of the desire for the sense gratification, which comes from the mental concoction. So the whole material world is about the mental concoction. With the mind and senses together, we are creating the fantasy. That itself is a fantasy. And on top of that, this whole advertisement word is actually creating fantasy on top of the fantasy. So this urge is very powerful, having the sense, coming in contact with the sense objects. It's irrepressible. senses always roaming that how can I get contact with this object, that object, this object, that object. And Srimad Bhagavad Gita actually tells us that Indriyana hi charato yan mano vidhiyate tadasya harati pradnya vayurena vivambasi. That it says that as a strong wind takes away the boat on the water, similarly, even if one of our senses on which the mind focuses can carry away the man's intelligence. It is so powerful that even if one senses is actually, if we let it free, it can takes away the harati. Harati means takes away. Pradnya, the intelligence. Tadasya harati pradnya. It will take away the intelligence of the man's living entity. So we can see here the senses are being constantly assaulted by the sense object. But the key here, it is said in this particular shloka of Bhagavad Gita, it is said the key is not to focus on the sense object. Like for example, sometimes if we are in a room and then the fan is actually spinning, there is some sound coming out of the fan, but we don't even realize there is a fan because the mind is not focusing on that. So similarly, if our mind is focusing on the sense object, then it's very difficult to control that urge. So then what we have to do? We have to do exactly the opposite. We have to focus on the mind, not on the sense object, but something higher. So we have to focus our mind on the spiritual objects. That is nothing but the Krishna's holy name. So just like when we do chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, as soon as we start chanting, our mind actually goes on the sense objects. It's very difficult to control. It's very difficult to focus on the holy name. So, but we have to, by continuous practice, abhyasa and vairagya, Lord Krishna says, by abhyasa and vairagya, we have to bring the mind back on focusing on the holy name. So we can see Srila Prabhupada's conversation with his disciples, that how the sense objects in a room conversation, sense objects contacting the sense object causes the destruction. So one Srila Prabhupada, along with his disciple, they were in a room and hearing the bells and the music from the passing, I think it was the ice cream truck. So Prabhupada asked disciples, what is that? One disciple said, Prabhupada, it's an ice cream truck, Srila Prabhupada. Then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, ice cream. So you are taking ice cream? Then disciple said, no, Srila Prabhupada. So because sometimes they make with the eggs or animal pie products, who knows what that. But anyway, the truck is going up and down the street. So Srila Prabhupada said, oh, they are canvassing. So disciple said, yes. Then Srila Prabhupada actually says that this is all Maya. Maya says that, come on, come on, come on, enjoy me, enjoy me. And then Prabhupada actually gives that, and he gives an example that from Srimad Bhagavatam, that how even if our one sense is actually let loose on the sense object, how it causes a distraction. And during that conversation, Srila Prabhupada gives the 5 examples. So he says, the sense of sight, that is the eye. I wanted to always see a good object or some beautiful form. So then Prabhupada gives the example that the moth is captivated by the glaring beauty of the fire. So what it does, it actually rushes to the fire, and it doesn't know that if it goes to the fire, it is nothing but that it is his end, it is his death. But there is an irresistible desire, this uncontrollable urge from that moth. And when it comes to enjoy, just like Prabhupada says, come on, Maya will say, come on, enjoy me, enjoy me. And as soon as this moth goes to the fire, that blazing fire consumes him and end of it. So this is just one sense, that is the eye. When we let it loose to go for the beautiful form, just like a moth will have an end of in terms of a death, similarly we will have a destruction. Then Prabhupada gives the example of the ear. The ear likes a melodious song, music. So then Prabhupada gives the example that the example of a deer in the forest. The hunter will actually play a very melodious song, either by flute or some musical instrument, and deer will actually assemble there. And because of that melodious song, the deer will get completely absorbed. It becomes immovable, and it becomes a nice prey for the hunter, and hunter will actually catch him. It get intoxicated, immobile, and it becomes easy prey for the hunter, and deer loses his life. So this is the second example Srila Prabhupada gives, that by just having ear, one actually comes to a destruction. Then next is the tongue, and tongue is looking for palatable objects, taste. So then Prabhupada gives the example of the fisherman. The fisherman throws the hook, and at the end of the hook, actually puts some bait, so that the fish will get attracted to that. And as soon as, so it actually throws into the water, and the fish get attracted to that bait, and it gets stuck to that. And as soon as it gets stuck, and it pulls out. So then it similarly, just like the moth is attracted to that, so similarly the fish is attracted to that hook, and finally the fisherman catches it. The next is the smell. The smell, Prabhupada gives the example of musk deer, which is in the Himalaya forest. So the musk deer secretes a very chemical, which is a very fragrant substance. And when this chemical fragrant substance that it secretes, and this musk deer is trying to see where is this fragrant is coming, not realizing that actually it is coming from its own body. Then it actually starts searching the whole forest, and finally because of the fatigue it gets tired, and at the end because of running ether and tether it's died out of the fatigue. So that is the example of the smell. So the nose wanted to get a fragrant. So similarly, Prabhupada gives another example of the bumblebee. Bumblebee is entrapped by smelling the lotus flower. It enters the lotus flower, and as soon as it enters, the lotus flower gets closed, and it loses its life. So that is the smell. And the last example that is given is by the touch. So the mahout, or the how the elephant is caught, the Prabhupada gives the example, the elephant is caught by the touch, the attraction between the male and female. So here the trained sea elephant actually goes to the male elephant, and the male elephant tries to follow that. And as he follows that, there is actually made a big pit, and the sea elephant try to come get, because it is trained, and the male elephant will follow, and such a way that the male elephant will actually get entrapped into that pit, and then he's shackled and taken away. So like this, in this way, Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada says that Bhagavatam offers the various examples how our material senses can trap us in illusion. Just by being pulled by one uncontrolled senses, each of these different creatures is losing its life. But in this modern civilization, we have got all our senses, unfortunately, not one or two, but all our senses uncontrolled. Then we can imagine what our position is. These examples are from the animal and insect kingdoms, wherein only one uncontrolled sense is prominent. But in our modern society, we have all our senses uncontrolled. Then we cannot imagine what is our situation. Prabhupada, in fact, Prabhupada gives another example from Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says that imagine a man who has got 6 wives, and as he entered his house, and suddenly all the wives are dragging him. You come to my room, you come to the, say one wife is taken his left hand, another has taken his right hand, another has taken his left leg, another has taken his right leg, and so forth, and he's wondering, where shall I go? So this is the situation in modern society, as a position of the human beings overwhelmed by so many senses, which to date we have neglected to control. So instead of controlling the senses, today we are encouraged to go and let the senses enjoy, and we are becoming the servant of the senses. Godas, Prabhupada said that, Godas. And so by letting the senses loose, we are losing the very wonderful, very rare opportunity, Manusya Durlabha Manusya Janma, losing this opportunity of the human form of life, That is to control the sense in Krishna's service and then go back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada writes in Nectar of Instruction in the preface that the purpose of the human form of life, the spirituality begins with controlling the senses and controlling mind. But here we are encouraged when these animals, they actually loses or they go to the destruction just by having one senses, and then we cannot even imagine what will happen to our all senses are uncontrolled. So then, just like Bhagavad Gita, the 6.6 shloka was actually talking about that. So we have to control our senses. So all we have now is our senses, but now we have to focus our senses. Now where to focus? If we focus our senses in the wrong place, then actually our destination will also be wrong. So there is from Subhashita, there is one very wonderful shloka, just like a tongue wants to glorify. And the question is that to whom to glorify. So there is very wonderful shloka from Subhashitas. It is said that Vrishtanam cha vivaheshu Geetam Gayanti Gardarbaha Parasparam Prashansanti Aho Rupam Aho Dhvani. This is a very wonderful shloka which actually talks that once there was a marriage at the house of camel, and this camel invited all his guests, and his guest included donkey also. So then this donkey and the camel started glorifying parasparam prashansanti. So they started parasparam, they started glorifying prashansanti to each other. And what did they? Aho rupam aho dhvani. So the aho rupam, that means the donkey started glorifying for the camel for his beautiful form, and the camel started glorifying aho dhvani. He started glorifying donkey for his voice. So we can understand that if we focus, or if we glorify, or if we wrong usages of our senses, can actually take to the wrong destination. So that's why Nectar of Instruction says, Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jiva vegam udara upasta vegam etan vegan yo vishe dhiram sarvam apimam prithvi sasishyat. It is said that this urge, if we are able to control the urge of all these senses, then we are eligible to become disciples all over the Prithvi. Sarvam apimam Prithvi sasishyat. So that means we have to control our senses. We cannot let our senses go loose. And also that the focus of the focus of the object should not be that camel glorifying donkey and donkey glorifying that. No, our senses should be focused on the right object. And what is that right object? So once Srirangam, that priest, actually tells us that how people when they come to take a darshan of Lord, and by standing in a queue for a long period of time, and when they come in front of the Lord, they will close the eyes, and then this priest will have he will have in a stick in his hand, and he will say that, why are you closing your eyes? Because the feast for the eyes are the Lord's beautiful form here. So you have come here to gaze upon the beautiful form of the Lord here. So then why you are closing your eyes here? So when you waited for hours together in a line for darshan, then you open your eyes. So he will actually tap on the devotees that you please open your eyes and take a. So the point here that the feast for the eyes is the beautiful form of Lord. In fact, there is a beautiful story in the same context that from Dhanur Das and Ramanujacharya. So this Dhanur Das and they lived in that particular place near to Srirangam. He was a very excellent athlete and archer, and his wife was so beautiful. It is said that like a damsel. So Dhanur Das will never leave her alone, and he used to always gaze her. Always gaze her beauty all the time. So once she wanted to see the Chitra festival of Nam Perumal. So Dhanurdas took her and walking by her side. So, and what he was doing, he was covering her head so that she will not be her beauty will not be phased away by the sun rays. So he was covering her head by the umbrella. And so then he was actually, instead of that Nama Peruval festival was going on, and instead of looking at the eyes of the Lord, so this Dhanurdas was actually looking the eyes of her beautiful wife. And then Ramanujacharya noticed him, and it was something very odd scene when everybody is actually looking toward the festival, and this Dhanurdas was actually looking at the beautiful eyes of his wife. So he said, Ramanuja approached Dhanurdas and asked straight away why he was doing something like this. So Dhanurdas replied, he said, look at the beautiful eyes of my wife. It's so beautiful, Swamiji. I fell in love with her eyes. I have never seen such a beautiful eyes ever. Then Ramanujacharya said that, if I show you the beautiful eyes more than this, what will you do? Then Dhanurdas replied that, I will forever will be in your service. Then Ramanujacharya caught hold of Dhanurdas and took him to the Sri Rangam, that means the Ranganath temple, and see that, look at the beauty of the eyes of the Lord. And when Dhanurdas saw that, he actually felt captivated for lifelong, and then he became one of the prime disciples of Ramanujacharya. So we can understand that the feast for the eyes is the beautiful form of the Lord. So that is where we have to focus on. In fact, similarly from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, Gopis sings a very beautiful song. They are cursing the Brahma because the eyes are meant for seeing Krishna always. And then they curse Brahma Dev that he created the eyelid and the eyelash because it is obstructing us by seeing Lord Sri Krishna, which causes disturbances. It is said that when Lord Krishna goes up to the forest, it is said that Atati yet Bhavan hini kanam truti yugayate. So that a fraction of second becomes like a millennium, and because they cannot see Krishna. But this creator, this engineer, the designer of this, he had made this eye and eyelid because it is obstructing us seeing Lord Sri Krishna. He's a foolish creator which has actually created such a design. So we can see that the Gopis does not want to even let the moment go away from Krishna's beautiful form. Atha, in fact, Nectar of Devotion also says, Atha Sri Krishna Nama Dina Bhavyat Graham Indriyam Sevan Mukhya Hi Jiva Yada Swayam Eva Spurti Yada. So by engaging our senses in the service of Krishna, and especially here it is said that Jiva Adi, by engaging the Jiva in the chanting the holy name and honoring the prasadam which is actually offered to Lord Sri Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam, similarly, it is said that Tascharavinda Nayanasya Padarvinda Kinja Kilma Mishra Tulasi Kara Makaranda Vayu. So when the breeze carrying the aromas of tulsi leaves from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, and it entered the nostril of the Kumaras, and they experienced the change in their body and mind, and they were attracted to the Lord Sri Krishna. So we can see that by eyes are meant to see the beautiful form of Lord Sri Krishna. The tongue is meant to taste the Krishna Prasadam and chant the holy name of Lord Sri Krishna. The nose is meant to smell the flowers which are offered, or the tulsi which is offered to Lord Sri Krishna. In fact, Ambarish Maharaj gives a very wonderful shlokas in 9th canto. Savai mana Krishna padaravinda varchasi vaikunta gunan varna. So Ambarish Maharaj used his mind in meditating on the Lord. He used his word in glorifying Vaikunta Gunan Varna, glorifying the Lord. His hand in cleaning the temple of the Lord. His ear in hearing the words spoken by the Lord. His eyes seeing the deity of Lord Sri Krishna. His legs walking to the temple of the Lord. His nose in smelling the flowers offered to the Lord. And his head in bowing down to the Lord. So that is how we have to utilize all our senses in the service of Lord Sri Krishna. Here also it is said that the serpent with the 5 hoods. So these five hoods are nothing but the prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. And this prana actually activates all the 10 senses activated are by the five hooded serpents, and it's actually engaging the senses into the sense objects, the female parts. And that is where Srila Prabhupada gives little more informations about this, the five functions of this the serpent, which is nothing, which are protecting, are nothing but the prana vayu. And there are different prana vayus, and they are facilitating the sense objects, the senses coming into the contact with the sense objects. And that is where, as per the Ayurvedas, we can see that if one of the prana vayus are actually not very strong, the senses actually become very weaker. And then Prabhupada gives the little bit information that in different purports, not in this purport, but these are the sense interacting the sense object, like the ear for hearing, the eyes for seeing, the nose for smelling, the tongue for tasting. So these all are engaged in the activities. These are the functions of the prana vayu. The apan vayu goes downwards. The vyana vayu acts, strings, and expands. The samana vayu adjusts the equilibrium, and the udana vayu goes upwards. So these are the different systems, different prana vayus are there. And then Prabhupada also talks about the kundalini chakras. So anyway, we don't have to go in detail, but in a brief, it is mentioned that there are different chakras, and the energy, the kundalini, the energy is actually at the bottom of the muladhara chakra. And different yogis, by either hatha yogas or by ashtanga yogas, so they practice by raising this kundalini from this muladhara chakra to the swadhisthana chakra, to manipura chakra, to anahata chakra, to the vishuddha chakra, and finally to the adnyata chakra. Prabhupada says that, so as they raises this kundalini shakti, that it means that they are destined to the higher planetary system. So all the yogis try to do that by doing the different asanas, by different yogas. They try to raise the kundalini shaktis from the mool, from the bottom of the spinal cord to the topmost of the chakra. However, Prabhupada says that for the devotees practicing Krishna consciousness, we don't have to do engage into all those things. By practicing bhakti, we can actually get experiences all those things, and in fact more than that. Brahma bhutaya prasannate na shochati na kankshati. So we will be able to experience which is beyond the three modes of material nature. The focus, Srila Prabhupada says that we have to engage Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So we have to engage our activity, ourselves, all these senses in the service of Lord Sri Krishna. So what we discussed is that there are the serpent, the five serpents are nothing but the prana vayus, are different life here, and they are actually facilitating the senses and the sense objects. And the attendants, the male attendants, are nothing but the 10 sense objects, and the female attendants are nothing but the senses engaging the sense object. That is the interaction that is called as the female attendants. So when the male attendants and the female attendants comes together, and that is what the happiness that the living entity is looking for. However, as we saw that, we discussed that when the senses coming in contact with the sense objects independent of Krishna, which actually leads to the distress, no matter whatever we try. And that is where in Prem Vivarta Prabhupada writes in the purport that Bahirmukha, the tendency of Bahirmukha, we have to change that. So now how do we know? What we discussed so far is focusing on the sense object will actually lead to the destruction. The shloka from Prahlad Maharaj is that it is dukkha dukkha. If we engage in the sense gratification, it is nothing but it is compared to the such a tuchha, insignificant, that is a itching sensation. And the more we engage in the itching sensation, it will lead to the dukkha. So now what we have to do? So we have to Bahirmukha, we have to change the tendency from Bahirmukha to the Lord, turn towards Krishna. And as soon as we turn towards Krishna, the Maya's influence naturally vanishes. Maya does not pursue. The good news is that Maya does not pursue the soul who is looking towards Krishna. Srila Prabhupada gives an example that sun. When there is a sun, there is no darkness. But when we turn away from the sun, the first thing that we see is a shadow. What is the first thing that we see? Shadow, darkness, ignorance. So the Maya is like a shadow. So what we experience in this material world, we experience the shadow happiness, we experience the shadow relationship. Everything in this material world that when we turn away from Krishna is a shadow. And within the shadow, we try to extract all these things we have received from Krishna. But we do all those things. That is the condition that we have agreed to come in this material world. That one condition that we are looking for the enjoyment independent of Krishna, Bahir Mukha. And for that condition, we are ready to agree to any condition. And as soon as that we agree to condition, it comes with the price. And what is the price? That we have to take this body. And the body means suffering. And when Maya Japate, as soon as we turned away from Krishna, Maya actually pounces on us. There is no time lag. As soon as we turned away from Krishna, Nikatestha Maya Japate. So Maya immediately will take us and pounces on us. And then when we come under the influence of Maya, promising the happiness, but there is a star. The conditions apply. So what is that condition that nobody tells is that as soon as we accept this body, the material energy works in a very particular way. It promises the happiness, but it comes with the misery. Every happiness that actually promises, it comes with the distress or dukkha or misery. For example, if somebody is smoking, it promises some happiness, but at the result is the lungs gets affected. Somebody is attracted to the beverages, different kind of beverages, which liver get afflicted. So any things in this material world, the promises of happiness, it comes with the misery. And that is why we are frustrated in this material world. So any happiness that it's promised in this material world, it comes with the distress or misery. Not only that, it is not only that, but the other problem with that, this happiness, that another condition that it comes, that it is the happiness, it doesn't come for our eternity. It is very temporary happiness. And after that, the misery will come. So as we say that in Bhagavad Gita, just like the happiness and distress are the season, winter and summer season. Then someone may say that, okay, just like the happiness will come and the misery will also come and both will pass. Yes, the misery will also pass, but the series of miseries will there be always all the time. And that is where Lord Krishna says that this material world, unfortunately, this material world is nothing but dukkhalayam ashashvatam. So that is the problem with this material world, that every promise of the happiness comes with the misery, and the happiness which is promised is a temporary, and the distress or the misery may be temporary, but it comes with the series of the miseries, one after the other. And as a living entities, as it was told that one example, the living entity is chased by the tiger, and then it falls into the dark well. And then on top of that, there is a tiger. At the bottom, there is a snake, which is in form of death, and is actually holding the branch. And the branch is actually beaten by the white and the black snake, which are nothing but the day and night, which actually reducing our life. And in the midst of that, we get the one drop of the honey, and then we are saying we are very happy. So similarly, here, the gap between the two misery is nothing but the happiness that we experience in this material world. And that is the intrinsic characteristics of this material world, that every happiness comes with the misery, and every happiness is actually a temporary. So Prabhupada says, it's a very beautiful shloka Prabhupada quotes in the purport. Utkramantam stitam vapi bhunjanmam ma gunanvitam. Utkramantam means living one body to another. Stitam means in this body. Bhunjanam, enjoying. Gunanvitam, under the spells of modes of material nature. Vimuda, the person, the full person. Nanu pasyanti, he cannot understand. Pashyanti Jnana Chakshusam. Only when our eyes are opened by the knowledge, one can see this. So here it is said that we cannot understand how the living entity leaves one body to another, or how we are actually in this body itself under the influence, gunanvitam, under the influence of the three modes of mortal. We are continuously suffering. However, vimudha nanu pashyanti. This vimudha, the foolish person like this living entities, like us, like me, or us, we are not able to see this. But we can see pashyanti jnana chakshusha. When our eyes are opened with this knowledge, then we can actually see. So without opened eyes, if we are in this human form of life, so it is that we got the human form, but we are not the human beings, because our eyes are not opened with the jnana chakshusha, with the treasure of the knowledge. So it is like that, if somebody has given a cache full of trunks but no keys, what is the use of that cache if you are not able to open that trunk with the keys? Similarly, without the knowledge, we are without a key to this treasure. So the human form, we may have the human form of life, but if we don't have this jnana chakshusha, if our eyes are not open with the knowledge, then we are like the human form but with the human beings. And then how this jnana comes? It comes to the Guru Parampara. Sometimes even if we may have knowledge, but we forget at the time of testing, when the challenging situation comes, just like Karna was cursed that he will have all this knowledge, but that right moment he will forget. So similarly, we may have this knowledge, but at the right moment of testing situations, when there is a very uncontrollable urge, then we forget all this knowledge. And after that we say, oh, again I did the same mistake, because the mind is completely afflicted. And when the mind is completely afflicted, it actually overrides the intelligence, and intelligence becomes very weak. And that is how this becomes due to the weakness of Hridaya Daurvalyam. This becomes due to the weakness of our heart. That means our heart is not sufficiently nurtured by the spiritual hearing. The strength doesn't come from the spiritual strength comes by continuously hearing. Evam buddhe param buddha samstabhyam atmanam atman jahi shatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, it is said that we can strengthen our intelligence by spiritual practices. The spiritual practices by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. When we engage ourselves in the spiritual practices, hearing Sravanam and Kirtanam, by chanting and hearing the Krishna Katha, Tava Katha Amrutam Tapta Jivanam, Gopi Git, it is said that the gopis are saying that we want to hear the nectarian pastimes of Krishna Katha, because it will actually, this Tapta Jivanam, it will take us beyond this Tapta Jivanam. It's so much of suffering. So similarly here it is said that by spiritual practices, one can actually make our intelligence and heart very strong, and then we'll be able to overcome the irresistible urge of the senses. And that would only happen when our heart is very strong, and the heart becomes strong when we are actually practicing Krishna consciousness very sincerely. So to Srila Prabhupada many times said that the conclusion here, it is said that Rushikena Rishikesha Sevanam. So we have to use our senses to satisfy Krishna, the Lord of the Master of the senses. And that is the bhakti, that is the devotional service. Prabhupada says, quoting Srimad Bhagavatam, that if we have to satisfy our senses directly, we don't, Prabhupada gives the example that we don't pour the water on the twigs, branches, or leaves, but we would pour the water on the root. Similarly, when we engage into the service of Rushikena Rishikesha Sevanam, automatically all our senses are nurtured or strengthened. By giving the food stuff, just by giving the food stuff to our stomach, all our senses are nurtured, and automatically all our arms and fingers become satisfied. So that is the secret that Srila Prabhupada said, that is what we shall be happy by trying to satisfy. Instead of trying to satisfy our senses, we have to satisfy Krishna's senses. If we try to satisfy our senses, It is a dukkha dukkha. There is nothing but dukkha and dukkha. But if we try to satisfy Krishna's senses, automatically our senses will be very satisfied, and that is the secret of Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada said that the Krishna conscious moment means that we have to train our senses, the 10 Gyanendriyas and 5 Gyanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas, total 10, which are the male attendants, Sakhaya Gana, the male attendants of the Puranjani. So we have to train our senses to satisfy Krishna, and that is the Krishna conscious moment. So Les Prabhupada says that we have in it's so inspiring that when we hear Srila Prabhupada said that for many lifetime, thousands and millions of lifetimes, we have simply tried to satisfy our personal senses. And what is the result? Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi jatani jatare shayanam, ye sansare kalu dostare krupaya vare, pahi murare. Again and again satisfying our senses, it's guaranteed that we will get none other but the life again in mother's womb, and then we take birth, again death, birth, jatasya hi dhruva mrityu dhruva janma mrityu. Sure that we will be assured to get again another birth. So then Srila Prabhupada said that let this lifetime be dedicated to satisfying Krishna's senses. That is the Krishna consciousness. Let this lifetime, at least this one lifetime, we have to be dedicated for satisfying Krishna's senses. Let me try and then see what happens. We will not be the loser. Prabhupada says, Prabhupada is assuring that chant and be happy. Prabhupada says that we will not be the loser. Even if we sometimes wonder whether we are being inconvenienced by the directly not satisfying our senses, but still we will not be the loser, because when we engage in the service of Krishna, Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta, when it comes in contact with the Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta, automatically Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, we automatically become very happy and satisfied. And that is the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada tells us, that let this one lifetime be dedicated for the service of Lord Sri Krishna. Let Lord these 10 attendants be let loose. By having one attendance loose, we are actually getting so much of trouble. Seeing the example from Srimad Bhagavatam, imagine if we let all our senses loose, and then the destination that we cannot even imagine. So let this one lifetime be dedicated to the service of Lord Sri Krishna, and then our life will be actually glorified. That is the purpose of the life. Then we'll be very happy. That is the purpose. That is the success of life. If we don't engage in the service of Krishna, even if we have anything else other than that, we may have a lot of money, maybe good bank balance, anything other than that, but this is nothing but srama eva hi kevalam. This is nothing but the wastage of labor. The real purpose of the human life, Prabhupada says that we should engage our senses in the service of Lord Sri Krishna. So with that, we will pause here, and today we'll just quickly go through that. Today is the 9:43, so we have a few minutes, maybe 5-10 more minutes. Sriram Prabhu, is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so today the disappearance day of great Vaishnava Acharya Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So maybe the few words about Gaur Kishore Das Babaji for our own purification, because we don't have qualification, but just by glorifying such a wonderful Acharya, great Acharya, that it actually we become eligible to receive some mercy from. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, he was married, and when his wife actually passed away, so he left his grahastha life, and then he actually moved to Vrindavan and took so for he made Vrindavan as actually his residence for over 30 years. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji stayed in Vrindavan performing the bhajans under the trees at Sri Govardhana, Nandagram, Varsana, Radha Kunda, Surya Kunda, Raval, Gokula, and different places of Vrindavana. In that secluded place, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji would chant around 2 lakh names of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, close to 128 rounds of japa. So he felt very painful separation from the Radha Govinda and cried profusely. He wandered throughout the Vrindavana forest, the Dwadasha Kana, the forest of Vrindavana. He would loudly chant the holy names in a very deep, full of lamentation. So he would actually chant one bhajan. So there's only first few lines of that bhajan is that Kotai Kotaye go prema mai, Radhe Radhe, Radhe Radhe, go Jaya, Radhe Radhe. So he said, Kotaye go prema mai, Radhe Radhe. Kotaye go prema mai, Radhe Radhe. Radhe Radhe, go Jaya, Radhe Radhe. So, oh Radhe Radhe, where are you? Oh goddess of ecstatic love, that is the prema mai. Oh Radhe Radhe, all glories to you. Oh Radhe Radhe, all glories to you. So that was the Sri Babaji's mood of renunciation was unparalleled. That's why it is called as Sakshat Vairagya Murti. Sometimes he ate mud from the banks of Radhakunda or the Yamuna. Other times he took Madhukari. He will go to from one house to the other house, and he would be limited only the 7 houses. And how much he will do? Just like a bee collects a drop of honey from each flower. So similarly, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji would take only very limited from Madhukari from each house. He saw all the Brajavasis. The mood of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was that he was seeing all the Brajavasis, that means the residents of the Vrindavan, that are being the direct personal associates of Radha and Krishna. And as a result of this vision, that he would actually pay respect to the every person, every animal, cow, crow, bird, tree, creeper, insects, and ant in the holy dham. While staying in Varsana, he would actually made flower garlands every day for Radha and Krishna. And after 30 years of wonderful services, intimate services to Radha and Krishna, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji felt inspired by the Radha and Krishna, and then he actually moved to Navadvipa Dham. And then he visited all the Leela Sthala of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Gaur Mandala. And then he used to sing one bhajan there, which means that by receiving the mercy of Nityananda, one can receive the mercy of Gauranga, and which one makes eligible for the Krishna Prema. And with the Krishna Prema, one can attain the service of Radha, Srimati Radharani and Gopis. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was the personification of the renunciation. Completely detached, he would wash the discarded clothes to cover his body. He would not get the new clothes. He would actually get the discarded clothes from the corpse or the dead bodies, and then he would actually use those kinds of clothes. He drank from the rejected clay pot. He would use the grains, which is actually what he got from the Madhukari, and he would eat the parched rice mixed with the Ganga water, or simply sometimes he would eat the mud from the Ganga's bank, and that's how he sustained his life. He would carry the 2 books written by Narottam Das Thakur, Prarthana and Prem Bhakti Chandrika. On Ekadashi day, he would not eat or even drink a drop of water. And understanding that Gaur Kishore Das Babaji to be Mahabhagavata, many would try to serve, but he never accepted the service from anyone. To keep the mundane people approaching him, he would actually keep him in a secluded place. Once he resided in a lavatories, that's the restrooms at the Kulia Dharmashala for 6 months. And when the public official came to offering to build him a proper bhajan kutir, Babaji Maharaj locked himself inside and said that he already had one. So he believed that associating with the materialistic people is much worse than the smelling of a stool in the latrine. Once one Calcutta doctor came and he wanted to open a free health clinic in Navadvip Dham, and Gaur Kishore Das Babaji advised him. He said that if you really want to live in Navadvip Dham, then give up all your desire to run a free clinic for healing the sense enjoyers. If you want to really render the substantial service, then renounce everything except what promotes the Hari Bhajana. All other kinds of, he said, all other kinds of duties and the services simply bind one to the cycle of karmic reaction. So he recommended that you renounce everything, you give up everything. His favorite quote was that if you go for a good bhojana, the eating palatably, you will spoil your bhajana. So once, this was a favorite quote, once Gaur Kishore Das Babaji's one devotee, he ate a festival, prasadam, and in his bhajan kutir, and Babaji Maharaj would not speak to him for 3 days. On the fourth day, he said, "You accepted this festival prasadam given by the low class people because you took the food without considering its origin. Your bhajan is useless." So that's why the Gaur Kishore Das Babaji's favorite slogan was, "If he wants to enjoy the bhojan, then he will spoil the bhajan." So the essence of Gaur Kishore Das Baba's instruction was that the divine, the holy name of Krishna offers the complete shelter. One should never try to remember Radha, Krishna artificially. By constant chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it will automatically purify the heart. And by purification, one gradually, Lord Krishna will reveal the spiritual form, Nama Rupa Guna, Nama Guna Rupa Lila, and then one will realize our own eternal spiritual form, service, and the elevation to the particular of our spiritual identity. So toward the end of the life, 1915, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji left his body, and in his statement he said that, "Drag my dead body through the streets of Navadvipa." So the so-called the advanced devotees proposed to commit the said sacrilege. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the disciple of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji and spiritual master of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, he challenged all these so-called devotees. He said that according to the Shastra, if you have not observed the syllabus in the last 24 hours, you are contaminated. Therefore, you are not qualified to touch my Guru Maharaj. And then he challenged, if there is anyone who has observed the syllabus in 24 hours, you are eligible to touch. And all these so-called devotees actually disperse. And then that is how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur established November 1915, almost 106 years ago, established Samadhi, and on the bank of Sri Chaitanya Mat Radhakunda near Lord Chaitanya Yoga Pith in Sridham Mayapur, and Gaur Kishore Das Babaji left this material world and joined the eternal blissful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So the pranam mantra to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji that we sing is, "Namo Gaur Kishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murte Vipralamba Rasam Budhe Padam Bhujate Namaha." It is said that I offer my respectful obeisances to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who is the spiritual master of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the Sakshat Vairagya Murti, who is the personification of the renunciation, and he is always merged in a Vipralamba, feeling of separation, Rasambuddha, and intense love of Krishna, to such a great Acharya on his disappearance day of today. Let's pray and offer our humble obeisances that, of course, we cannot imitate Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, but by requesting his blessings and offering our humble obeisances that we get some drop of his mood of serving Radha and Krishna, that if we get that, our life will be successful. So let's offer our deep humble obeisances to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, that it will help us on our spiritual journey. So by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Disappearance Day Mahamahotsav ki jai. Hare Krishna. It's 9:54.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. So, really like to thank His Grace Yugala Prabhuji for his wonderful narration from Srimad Bhagavatam. So, re-emphasizing and reminding us again and again how to take care of our mind and the senses, and how we can really engage them, for Hushikesha, for the honor of the senses, and also very beautifully sharing the pastime and teachings from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj on his auspicious disappearance day. Thank you, Prabhuji. So let's thank Prabhuji by loudly chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. So, yes, our Damodar month is going on. So, tomorrow is Ekadasi. And the first 5 days of Damodar is starting from tomorrow. Yeah, Panchak starts from tomorrow. So, yeah, it's for us to intensify more our sadhana and be more absorbed in hearing, chanting, and offering our heart the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. And this is also a great opportunity once again to remind ourselves and to push ourselves a little bit more in sharing this fortune of the mercy of Srimati Radharani on this auspicious month to as many souls as possible. So we have seen a lot of devotees have been going out and in various ways they are giving this opportunity of offering lamps to the unfortunate souls. So yes, it's a great time to make the unfortunate ones fortunate. The mercy of Srila Prabhupada and all our Guru Parampara. So let's continue to do it. And if we have not yet done, or if still some are left, let's do it over the next couple of days. And thank you very much. So we understand our Harikatra Prabhu and our IVC devotees have gone to Yatra, short Yatra, and coming back today anytime. So they are not here. So I think we don't have any more announcement. Vandanada Prabhu or Yugala Prabhu, anything else you have for today?
That's why.
Okay. So it would be okay, Prabhuji, Gaurang can chant Namaste Narsimhaya. Gaurang or Samruddhi.
Yeah, Samruddhi.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna,
Oh, she's coming. So
Krishna
we'll just
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna,
Start.
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Shall we start, Prabhuji?
Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Yes, Prabhuji, yes, Prabhuji, yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Bol.
Namaste
Namaste Narasimhaya. Pralhad Ladadayine. Hiranyakasipu Rakshaha. Shilatankana Kalaye. Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsimha. Bahare Narsimha Hrudaye Narsimha. Narasimha जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय अनंत दे लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय अनंत दे जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद प्रभुपद जय निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय
भक्ति भक्ति विघ्न नरसिंह देव भगवान की जय भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जगत गुरु पति पावन शिला प्रभुपाद की जय
हरि हरि बोल
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you all the devotees for joining.